somebody who doesn't espouse to the particular beliefs of DEI, probably, they could work well with other people who are different from them. They could work very horribly with other people that are very different from them. So, a lot of you know, if you've watched this channel for a long time, you know that I am not a fan of diversity, equity, inclusion statements, or so-called diversity statements, because I do think they present an ideological litmus test to people rather than, actually having different worldviews on campus. But the question then, of course, comes as, what do we do about it when we have one of these kinds of questions arise? What do we do about those diversity, equity, inclusion statements? What is the solution? And this is where I come to, and again, I'm talking about this in part because, again, as I said many times, the university is the training ground for the next generation of scientists, and so that's why I keep an eye on things that could affect the university, as it does pertain very much to what can happen with respect to how the next generation of scientists are trained. So this caught my attention from the National Review. Here's a bill all states should enact right away. The nasty business of requiring applicants for teaching positions to submit diversity statements is sweeping the country. The purpose of such statements is to help leftist decision makers call out applicants who aren't sufficiently enthused about the whole social justice diversity agenda. State legislatures can and should put a stop to this. Toward that end, the James G. Martin Center and the Goldwater Institute have collaborated with Stanley Kurtz of the Ethics and Public Policy Center to draft a model bill, the End Political Litmus Tests in Education Act. Read about it and get the text of the bill here. Eager to preserve its control over academic hiring, the left will no doubt scream that this would be an interference with academic freedom. But it's nothing of the kind. To insist that government-funded schools abjure ideological tests and only seek to hire the most competent individuals is perfectly unobjectionable. So this is written by George Leaf, who is from the James G. Martin Center for Academic Renewal, which is what is mentioned here. I'm going to be a little bit more charitable with it in that, yes, there's quite possibly some that are just using this as a filter for viewpoints that they want to see. That's distinctly possible. But there was a Heterodox Academy piece that I covered a while back that talked about it, in that, one could just be looking for professors, for staff, for students who are compassionate. And that's not a bad thing to seek for. The question, of course, then becomes a DEI statement or a diversity statement doesn't necessarily ensure, having a specific belief with respect to that, doesn't necessarily ensure compassion in the slightest. And so, I find it skeptical. But the real question that I have is, I don't think diversity statements are good because I do think they amount to an ideological litmus test. I've said it many times. The question is what to do about it, and is this the right idea to have a bill, a law that says something to the effect of you cannot do that. And so that's where we get to the question. So it'll take you over here to the James G. Martin Center for Academic Renewal. And this is just a little bit, and we'll go they do have the text of their example bill here, and I'm going to show it, so we'll see. The End Political Litmus Tests in Education Act can help preserve academic freedom and freedom of speech and conscience at public schools, colleges, and universities. Traditionally, faculty candidates at public universities have been evaluated based on 4 documents: a cover letter, the curriculum vitae, the research statement, and teaching statement. Now a 5th document is being added, a statement in which the individual expresses his or her commitment to diversity. That is, how important is it to the individual how he or she acts to further diversity, equity, and inclusion. These statements are de facto political litmus tests and an effective tool for college universities, and even some K-12 schools to screen out viewpoint diversity. In conjunction with the Goldwater Institute and the Stanley Kurtz of the Ethics in Public Policy Center, the Martin Center has developed model legislation to prohibit public schools and universities from requiring candidates to submit diversity statements or any other statements that promotes a specific partisan, political, or ideological set of beliefs. So under that description, if this is the statement here, then it would say, if the reverse were true, and it was a very liberal minority of students who were at a very conservative institution, the conservative institution would not be able to compel the students to swear fealty to that in any matter, or the staff or the faculty, for that matter, swear fealty to any such thing, which on its face does sound good. The sort of like moral question in this is, does the government even have the right to tell folks that they can't tell? Are you prohibiting free speech by saying you can't prohibit free speech? It's a weird phrasing to say, but it is the moral question of, does even the government have a role in this particular instance? And also, how much does the First Amendment apply? We know full well, like I think others have talked about this, that for students, their rights to free speech does not end when they hit the classroom or the campus grounds, within reason. You cannot be obviously disruptive in a classroom. That would not be welcomed, and a teacher would be right to act upon that. But in this case, what we're talking about is you can't be compelled to say something here. And in this case, they're also talking about it with respect to professors and staff and the like, that you cannot compel them to say something. Which, for me, personally, I have made it, abundantly clear that I will not be compelled to say something or to ascribe something that I do not agree with, and do not believe in. And you shouldn't be. We've talked about this before. The practice of science, the scientific process, requires different viewpoints, because you need those different perspectives to get at what the truth is. And so compelling somebody to take a particular viewpoint, or just in a way screening out viewpoints that you disagree with, really dramatically reduces the different perspectives you're approaching a problem from, and therefore, you're much less likely to see something that could be completely throwing off what you think is the truth, as you pursue it. And so this is what caught my attention, is that this model bill, this has, just be completely clear, this has not been put forward as legislation in any state legislature anywhere that I know of just yet. I have seen some whisperings of couple of particular states that are thinking about it, but I have not seen anybody put it forward yet and actually, have it as a bill in consideration in state legislatures. And so this is an interesting question as to whether or not a state legislature can do this, can say to a university, you shall not have a diversity statement as a requirement there. And, it goes even further, because if you recall, I talked about it on this channel, the Professor K, because I can't pronounce his last name, in Canada, had several grants rejected because he wasn't sufficiently satisfying their diversity, equity, inclusion statements on a grant funding application, which is just as crazy. That is just as crazy. And most of the university professors that you meet, most of the research staff that you meet, like myself, we do basically pay our own salary, in the sense that we go looking for grant funding and what have you. And we have to get those grants funded. The university then does the legwork of taking care of things like Social Security and figuring out all those other kinds of little details for us, so that we don't have to sit down and do the administrative and tax bureaucratic labor and all that kind of stuff, and takes out their percentage, of course, to pay for all those people that do all the back end paperwork, and also pay for like facilities and IT maintenance and all those other kinds of stuff. There are lots of things that go on with grants, and I may do something like behind the scenes for locals members to explain all that, because a lot of people don't realize that there is a hell of a lot that goes on behind the scenes with respect to grants. But, if you're starting to put ideological bases into whether or not you get funding for something, it really smacks of a lot of Lysenkoism, to me, and that's why I start getting concerned. But at the same time, it's I can't quite put my finger on why it bothers me a bit to see a and maybe it's because I'm so I am committed to being a free speech absolutist here, and then what is concerning about this is the state legislature trying to perhaps legislate speech. Maybe I could see that argument, and at the same time I don't see that argument, because this is trying to stop a university from compelling speech or particular speech from a person if they don't want to give it. So in that vein, the other tab I have open here is actually the text of the bill itself, their model bill. This is not actually out there and available in a state legislature, as I said. This is primarily here just for now. End Political Litmus Tests in Education Act. A bill to prohibit the use of political litmus tests in public education. Whereas freedom of expression and conscience are essential to fulfill the academic mission of discovery, preservation, and transmission of knowledge, and whereas public colleges and universities must conform to the First Amendment's protections of free expression, and whereas First Amendment precedents have established the principle that freedom of speech prohibits the government from telling people what they must say, and whereas in recent years public education has allowed and embraced the use of political litmus tests in institutional decision making, and whereas the public institutions of state exist to serve all residents of the state without regard to politics. Now, therefore, be it enacted by state legislature, because again, this is a model bill. Section 1, political tests in public education are prohibited. No political test or qualification shall ever be required as a condition of admission to or promotion within any public educational institution of the state as teacher, employee, or student. For the purpose of this section, political test includes A, compelling or soliciting an applicant, teacher, employee, student, or pupil to identify. Is there a difference between student and pupil? Maybe I'm wrong, but that's a weird thing. I would think student and pupil in the context of education mean the same thing, but I could be entirely wrong. To identify commitment or to or make statement of personal belief in support of any ideology or movement that promotes. So this is a subsection I here. That promotes the differential treatment of any individual or groups of individuals based on race, ethnicity, including either of the following. Any initiative or formulation of diversity, equity, inclusion beyond upholding the equal protection of laws guaranteed by the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution. 2. Any theory or practice that holds that systems or institutions upholding the equal protection of laws guaranteed by the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution are racist, oppressive, or otherwise unjust. Okay, so that is subsection A, subsection 1, things 1 and 2. And that is specifically as pertains to diversity, equity, inclusion statements. That you cannot require, you cannot have it as a condition of an application. If this were to pass somewhere in some state legislature, that would be here. So under compelling, a political litmus test, compelling or soliciting an applicant, teacher, employee, student, or people to identify commitment to or make statement of personal belief in support of any ideology or movement. The other thing, subsection here, is that promotes a specific partisan, political, or ideological set of beliefs. And that is general and broad, like I was saying, that it could apply to not just the DEI statements, but that could apply to any kind of political advocacy statement, and a university would not be allowed to compel someone to make a statement in support of it. And you know, in the same telling, you could probably read this to say that a university could thusly also not force somebody to be against a particular ideology. So this is certainly interesting for me. I don't quite know what I think of this. Like I said, I'm still kind of on the fence with it, because the question, of course, I always have with any kind of law or what have you. And admittedly, I am not a lawyer, so I mean, lawyer, if there's a lawyer watching this, please go ahead, give some feedback on this. I would be curious of your thoughts of any kinds of hiccups or things like that you may run into. I would just be genuinely curious, because I do not know the legal side of this. I'm thinking of this more so, what does it mean? Would it really actually protect these professors in different sciences, their students and their staff from being forced to make a compelled thing, and would it protect other professors who are seeking employment from having to provide a political belief statement of political belief with respect to some of these things. So that's something else. So the other thing that they include as part of the definition of political test is giving preferable consideration to an applicant, teacher, employee, or student for opinions expressed or actions taken in support of another individual or group of individuals in which forgot to do something. That's what just occurred to me. Sorry. In which the institution's consideration is based on race or ethnicity of those individuals, any other specific partisan, political, or ideological set of beliefs. So what this has to do... Okay, there's two things here that they're counting as political test as I read this. For one, it's the statement where you're forcibly compelling somebody to make a statement, which, yeah, that's definitely... I'm kind of like, sure, I'm not for anybody being forced to say anything with respect to a particular ideology or anything like that. Nobody should be forced to make a statement on anything. That's kind of principle of free speech. You can express or choose not to express, and that's totally important there. And again, that goes also for academic freedom and for the integrity of the scientific process. No one should be forced to make a statement of belief on anything here, as far as I'm concerned. Whether or not it's the government's right action to get involved in this is a whole other question. And this one has to do with giving preferential treatment to people who espouse an opinion that you agree with or espouse a particular set of beliefs. So that has to do with the treatment of people, which I don't know that I mean, ideally, you shouldn't give people preferential treatment based on their opinions necessarily, especially when it comes to like jobs and hiring. But, behavior, character, merit, the work and things like that may come up in an employment situation for scientific practice. It's supposed to be about entirely the merit of a person's work. So, yeah, that's a curious thing here. And then the last two things here. So, last part of the political test thing that they define here. This does not include fidelity to or an oath or effort taken to uphold the Constitution of the state or the Constitution of the United States in here. So, it's basically excluding if you're expressing fealty to the Constitution and to the state, which I think in most state agencies you do in a degree. The legislature shall prescribe a penalty for any willful violation of this section if any provision is struck down, every other provision is okay. This is kind of like boilerplate whenever I've read legislation bits here. And it's a curious question, I don't know, is this the proper role of government? Is a bit more philosophical question to say to a university that you cannot compel this. I personally would like to, win the persuasive argument to say, why would you want to compel this? And no, it's not about compassion. No, it's not about making sure you find somebody who's capable of working with different kinds of people, because you don't necessarily know. Somebody who doesn't espouse to the particular beliefs of DEI probably, they could work well with other people who are different from them. They could work very horribly with other people that are very different from them. That there's no guarantee that somebody who has a DEI background works really well with people who are very different from them. And so I would like to win the persuasive argument, but there is the question legitimately now posed, because I'm seeing this, is this the role of government and what does it do for science? I would hope this would be helpful from the standpoint of, protecting the next generation of scientists' ability to think critically, not in the woke sense, but to think critically, actually, in the sort of Enlightenment sense. Think critically, think and develop reasoning, and, come to their own conclusions about things rather than being compelled to do so. And as others have pointed out, if you're compelling somebody to do something, and this was in the Heterodox Academy article, if you're compelling people to do something with this, you're increasing the chances of people flattering and lying. And I think the line that it was Alex Small's article in Heterodox Academy, I covered it on this channel a while ago, But what he basically said is when it's good to be pious, when it looks good upon you to be pious about something, the ambitious will be pious. Doesn't necessarily mean they believe it, but they'll espouse it and they'll lie and flatter to get through on something. And so that's not good either, to get the people who just flatter their way through it. And so I would be, for those reasons, very against DEI. I'm very against DEI statements in generally for a lot of those reasons, in particular because it's an ideological litmus test, is I think, would something like this potentially project scientific integrity? Potentially is the key word there, because is it, I am asking, is it overbroad? Could it be used in the reverse? There's the specific thing here, which is about DEI statements, yes. But there's also the other thing here that, if it promotes a specific partisan, political, or ideological set of beliefs, which could be then to say, for example, if there was a very conservative university who wanted to push a political statement that, with regards to being pro-life at the university, what have you, and there were a minority of students who were pro-choice, students, faculty, and staff that are pro-choice, this would then say also that those who are pro-choice in that predominantly pro-life group of people could not be compelled to take a pro-life position or express a pro-life position. That is the other thing I could see from this. In which case, if that is how it holds, then it may very well protect scientists and push towards a more merit-based framework, in which case it might be good. The question is this the role of government to get involved, saying you cannot do this with respect to these statements? And I think in the terms of the public university, yes, because they are government universities, and government universities do have a responsibility to uphold the First Amendment. So anything that is sponsored by one of the given states. So this is an interesting question. I would be curious for your thoughts, actually, because this is a little out of my wheelhouse to look at legal stuff. But I would be very curious what others think. And it would be fascinating to know, because this is potential. Obviously, it's not anywhere in a state legislature yet, but it has potential. So let me know your thoughts on this and whether or not you think this is a good idea, bad idea, whether or not the government should get involved, all these kinds of things. That's it for now. Comment below if you have your thoughts. Please comment below. Like the video on the way out the door if you liked it. Hit the like button if you liked it. Goodness. Share the video, comment on the video, subscribe to the channel, all that good jazz. Come on over to shiosophia.locals.com, where more stuff is appearing behind the scenes all the time that doesn't get up here on YouTube. And soon, very soon, I will be doing my first ever live stream on this channel with guests and whole works. So we're very much looking forward to it. I'm just trying to get it all straightened out in scheduling, and you should see it appear soon. But until next time, until that particularly comes along, I'm Adrian, and I hope you all stay curious, my friends.